Hi, my name is Michael Chikeen. The smartest people I've met have one common belief, that us silly humans really don't know much. For example, we still don't know why planes stay in the air, or how Tylenol or even gravity works. Yeah, gravity. Look it up. In today's distracted, clickbait, misinformation age, I wish we could all be less certain, more humble, and a lot more curious. Admittedly, I've been known to struggle with all three. So no more, no less, this show is my attempt to be that change. Thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to No More, No Less. My name is Michael Chikeen, and today I am with Emily Balcetis. Emily is an associate professor of psychology and the director of the New York University Social Perception, Action, and Motivation Research Lab, where she leads an international team of scholars, writers, artists, and advocates. In her research, Emily has uncovered previously unknown strategies that increase, sustain, and direct people's efforts to meet their goals. Her work has been supported by numerous national grants from the National Science Foundation and National Institutes of Health, and has also appeared in over 80 scientific publications. She's a two-time TEDx speaker and author of the book, Clearer, Closer, Better: How Successful People See the World. I'm so excited for this chat. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much.
So when I was reviewing some of your career, it seems you, at least recently, have been really focused on the visual world and reality and perception. And so I was wondering, how did you go from that into the perception of motivation and success? And was there something that happened in your life that kind of changed that focus?
Yeah, I already felt like my life was pretty full with what was on my to-do list, and then I decided to have a baby. And as anybody who's made that life change knows, like, you're never prepared, and it is always overwhelming. There's never a right time to do it, and I felt like, well, this was really not the right time to do it. And so I was already doing research on this area of trying to understand how can people better meet their goals, what's standing in the way, how can we be mindful about what's standing in our way, and identify those obstacles and figure out ways to navigate around them. And so then I was like, well, I should just try this all on myself, right? I study thousands and thousands of other people. Here's my chance to, like, really put my money where my mouth is. And so, yeah, that's probably one of those major turning points.
Right. And I guess from all the research you've done, what was the biggest shift you found within yourself?
Well, I think I'm just like a medical doctor is not immune to the common cold. And just because I'm the researcher doesn't mean like I'm any different than any other person. So, what I already knew to be true about other people was the same for me. That I really had goals. I really wanted to accomplish things, and yet they weren't happening. So the reason that people struggle often is not because they don't really want it. You must not really want it. Things that people might say to you if you ask them, like, this is really hard. It's not working out for me. Oh, maybe you don't really want it. No, people really want things that are on their life's bucket list. And that want isn't enough to translate into success. It's not that they're not trying hard enough. It's not that, they're doing something necessarily wrong or not right. It's just that it's really hard, because oftentimes we're pursuing multiple goals at the same time, because there's so much more that we want to do, or that we have to do, or that we have to do, than there are resources available to do it. And so that's the sticky part. It's like, how do we navigate through that when it's not a lack of want or motivation that oftentimes is the problem, especially for those things that we really want in our life but just aren't working out for us.
Interesting. I can really hear it in your voice too, that that all these things that we want, it's not like we don't have the desire or the motivation. Sometimes it's just something that is holding us back, that is more nebulous, I suppose. I mean, life, we kind of exist in this lifestyle of productivity of all the time. And so if you're constantly on this wheel and fitting in more things, the thing that maybe just needs more devotion and time just doesn't get it. Do you find Have you found time is a big factor in this?
Oh yeah, 100%. And we can talk about time for a long time if you want. But one of the people that I really look up to, an incredible researcher at the at UC Davis, University of California at Davis in Northern California. Her name is Allison Ledgerwood, and she does great work. You should look into her work. But
Sure.
her personal life lessons are amazing. And one of those is just I have 3 yeses that I can give in a year, and once I've hit those 3 yeses, there's no more yeses to give. Like, yeah, but what if it's like a really amazing opportunity? She's like, nope, I'm out of yeses. And it's like, how do you get to that point where you can apply and stick with that kind of rule for how do you manage your time? But she's happy and she's productive and she's doing important things. So it definitely is working. It's just a challenge for me. I want to give out a lot more yeses than my schedule really will allow, and I bet other people relate with that too.
Right. Yeah, it seems it's for everyone, it's probably an individual
Mhm.
situation. Like if
Mhm.
somebody wants to spend every single waking minute with their family and their friends, etc., but then they have these goals, then they're going to have to sacrifice this big part. If someone
Mhm.
has are very single-minded for what their goals might be for, publications, to write a book, start a business, blah blah blah, then maybe it's easier for them to let go. And so, how do you or have you seen people manage this idea of sacrifice that has to come with achieving?
Yeah, well, I think if we even put the word sacrifice out there, then that turns a lot of people off from the conversation. I'm like, I don't want to have to sacrifice. This is, well, at least from my perspective, this is America. It's different from your perspective in Barcelona, but like, this is America. We're supposed to be able to have it all. Or if you could take a different level of identity and like, as women, we're supposed to have it all. That's a phrase that we're supposed to be using and entertaining and thinking about ourselves. That's annoying in and of itself, that having it all, we can talk about that too.
Sure.
But when you start telling people like, no, you have to sacrifice, well, sacrifice already, like the term is defined by like giving up something that you want. So no, that's not going to be appealing to anybody. So how can we change the language around it? Because at the end of the day, like that is what needs to happen. Like time is a finite resource, and and efficiencies are a thing, but they're only a thing to a certain degree. So the
Hmm.
idea of sacrifice, while a word that maybe people don't like to entertain, is still a concept that we need to figure out how to navigate. So a lot of motivation researchers will talk about, okay, we have to think strategically about the ends and the means. The end, where do we want to go? The means, how are we going to get there? And if we can find means that are multifaceted, like this this way, this path actually can help me make progress on more than one of those ends, one or more of those goals that I'm hoping to achieve, like that's a huge win. Double down on that path and on that investment, and maybe that warrants more than its fair share because it's actually doing double or triple duty. And you may not just it may not just come to you that this mean is multi-final, that it can lead us to multiple final ends, and it might take some work to try to design a path or a way that we're spending our time or a resource that we're dedicating to try to do that. But that's a good investment in time.
Right. I want to go back for a second to talk about sacrifice because I love the idea because I do believe strongly that words matter. And
Mhm.
I think sometimes, unfortunately, we change language to kind of disassociate ourselves from reality. And I've always been of the mind that reality helps us make better decisions. And so you say no one's going to want to do that if you say you have to sacrifice something, which I think you're probably right. But there isn't the reality that if you want to do something that needs more focus than the average chore that you're doing, that you are going to have to sacrifice. So if that is if that as that is the truth, how do you think the wording helps deal with the reality of needing to do that?
I think it depends on what you're talking about with respect to sacrifice. Some people could take that same idea of like staying focused, being committed, putting on blinders for whatever distractions or other opportunities might come to be. Maybe that is what sacrifice means to you. But some people might call that passion. Some people might call that a flow state. So if we get more precise, we might find that like there actually is another word that resonates with people more, that has a positive connotation than sacrifice does for some people who might find that to be a negative connotation. Other people like sacrifices. Being able to, withhold from succumbing to a temptation is a sacrifice. And some people feel really proud of themselves when they're able to do that. So, I think it's first taking stock of what does that idea of sacrifice mean to you? Does it have a negative or positive connotation? If it's negative and the idea of having the sacrifice is off putting as a result, think more concretely about, well, what does sacrifice mean in this context? Why am I opposed to it? And is there another framing that makes it more appealing to me? So we're talking about like the labels that we put on, the words that we put on. The words have meaning. Some of those meanings might be devoid of reality. I don't think about it that way. I think that the way that we make sense, that we make meaning of our experiences, the words that we put on those experiences have a huge motivational impact. So I think that when we use the word sacrifice, that will be off-putting for a lot of people. Same with the idea of failure or obstacles. Who wants to approach a goal or like decide to invest in something when they know like the odds of failure are 60%, or there will be like insurmountable or extremely challenging obstacles that you're going to face in the first several months? And you know what? Motivation psychologists know that the best way to deal with that is to think about them in advance. Now, that could seem like really counterintuitive. When I'm most excited to do something new, I should be thinking about all the challenges and the ways that I'm gonna fail, and
Right.
that will set me up for success better. I don't want to think about failure when I'm really excited about something. I just want to ride that wave of positivity, and that's going to take me farther than thinking about how hard it's going to be or what's going to get in my way, the 6 different ways that I might fail. But that's because those words are negative to people. Failure, obstacles. For most people, that's off-putting, and that's why they don't want to entertain those thoughts. But if we frame it differently, if we put a different label on it and talk about setting ourselves up with plan B and plan C, creating a safety net, going in more informed, going in with an arsenal of possibilities and our, backup toolkit at the ready, well, that sounds more appealing. That label sounds like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to have a safety net for this thing that I really care about. It's the same idea, but it's a different label and it has a different motivational impact on us psychologically.
Right. I have a couple of friends in the entrepreneur space, and we've always said that like if we were to go back and know what we know now, we probably would never started the companies that we did, because we happen to have a specific disposition towards optimism, and maybe it's delusion, but we always have these ideas of like anytime we think of something, we're like, oh, that's a great idea. That should be really easy, and then we find out it's just going to be the hardest thing ever.
Mhm.
But then we have to like re-up our optimism to be like, oh, it should be fine. And there's like this constantly kind of convincing ourselves to go. And I think we become better business owners over the years, by not fooling ourselves. But I can see what you mean by like if you have that enthusiasm, it helps you to push forward and push forward.
Yeah. And that enthusiasm can come from knowing that you have backup plans. So at the beginning stages of a new business or of a New Year's resolution that you're setting for yourself, thinking about the challenges that you may face in the future and then coupling that with what will I do should I face that, that's preparation. That's doing the hard work in advance, because when something big comes your way, when you lose a cash flow, if you're a new entrepreneur that you're really depending on, that's going to be a panic moment. And that's not really when you're going to do your best, most creative brainstorming. You might not have time or resources or opportunity to start thinking creatively about how are we going to work through this possibility. But if you'd already done that in advance, when it wasn't a crisis moment, then you might have like 2 or 3 different options that you could entertain now that already get you halfway there to a solution when you're more pressed for time, when it is a crisis situation.
Right. I guess I think about when they want to design their own life and they want certain things and they want to create new realities, new life for themselves. I think maybe it's not so much now, but there used to be this real big idea of the secret, of this manifestation, and of this law of attraction, yada yada yada. I'm wondering what you think about all of those ideas in terms of your book of motivation. Do you think there's validity in it? Do you think do you think it's helpful?
I think it's helpful for some things, but for the ultimate goal of like increasing the odds of success, it in and of itself is not. And let me explain why. So why is it helpful? Well, first of all, some people really do struggle to figure out, where am I going? What do I want? What do I want my life to be? What's important to me this year? And going through that process, like The Secret suggests, of sort of compiling visual icons that reflect what you want, where you want to be, what that future positive you is going to look like, that's helpful. It's a helpful process to go through so that people can have that kind of direction and focus. Without it, it's like you're just investing effort aimlessly, but it's got nowhere to go. So we do want to know what the goal is. What are we working towards? And The Secret can offer suggestions for how to figure that out. The problem is that that perspective then goes on, it sort of stops the process of goal setting, just saying, okay, now stay positive, stay focused on what you want, put that positive karma out there. And the more positivity you put out, the more positivity is going to come back for you.
Right.
No, I'm all about being friendly. I'm all about, putting more positivity out in the world. We need that. But is it a strategy for increasing the success of goals? Maybe yes, maybe no. The maybe no reason is, if we look at the science of what can happen as people go through that process of visualizing, what is it going to be when I achieve X? What am I going to look like? What's it going to feel like? What's my day going to be like? That's beautiful. That's a beautiful visualization. That's a moment where you might feel really, really good. It might even, and in fact, the science says it does, lead us to feel a sense of goal satisfaction. We start to kind of chill out because now I can see myself there. It's not quite being there, but it's like halfway. I know what that's going to be like, and it feels good. And I don't need to have that sort of burning drive anymore. And in fact, what colleagues of mine at New York University did was measure systolic blood pressure as people were going through that experience. Systolic blood pressure is the top number on your blood pressure reading. And behavioral scientists know that it's an indicator of energization, of our body's readiness to get up and go and do something. Systolic blood pressure goes up for horses while they're still in the stalls before they're about to take off for a race. They're penned in, they're confined, they're not moving, but their blood pressure is raising in anticipation of bursting out and working really hard. What my colleagues found is that when people are visualizing how great it's going to be when I hit this goal, what does that look like? What does that perfect life, that goal satisfied life look like? Systolic blood pressure goes down relative to people who are thinking about how great it's going to be. What is that? What is it that I want? What am I striving towards? And couple that with thinking about the obstacles that they might experience along the way. Systolic blood pressure is higher in that case, because now they're like, okay, I've got a plan. This is the work. This is the work that I'm going to do. Here are the challenges I might face and how I would pivot through them. So it's almost as if you're sort of vicariously experiencing that desirable end state when you stop with just the process of setting the goal. There's more things that we have to do after that to increase the odds that we will succeed, like thinking about the obstacles, the possible failures, coming up with a plan B and a plan C, and making concrete plans of action that are going to connect the me and the here and now with that positive, desirable future self that I'm hoping to achieve. Let me give you an example about like that power of obstacle planning, foreshadowing failure. Michael Phelps, he's an incredible swimmer, one of the best men of recent times. And historic times, actually, because in 2008, when he was like first big on the Olympic stage, he was poised to do something that no Olympian in any sport had ever done in the history of the Olympic Games, which was win 8 gold medals in a single Olympiad. He had already won 7 at the time of this story. He had just the 200-meter fly to go, and if he would win that, he would win his 8th gold medal and break Olympic history. And the 200-meter fly was like his jam. That's what he was most known for. So it almost seemed like a shoo-in. Except when he dove off the side and started swimming, it's back and forth, his goggles started to leak. He had one length left and his goggles were completely filled with water and he was swimming blind. Now, we know that these races are determined by less than a second, right? The difference between first place and second place could be like 300 milliseconds, a third of a second. So
Sure.
even a brief moment of a hiccup or catching your breath or panic or just taking you out of that perfected flow state could mean the difference between breaking Olympic history and coming in second or third place. But it didn't cause him that kind of anxiety. It didn't break the state that he was in, because he instantly turned to his plan B, which was to start counting his strokes, because he knew exactly how many strokes it takes for him to get from one end of the pool to the other. So he was able to make that quick pivot, win that 200-meter fly, win his 8th gold medal, and break Olympic history. He would go on to win like over a dozen more medals in his time. He's incredible. But the reason that he could do that is because he had, and his coach had foreshadowed that possibility. They practiced for when your goggles fail, what do you do? They had envisioned that possibility, and they had rehearsed that plan B in advance of this moment of competition, when, of course, they couldn't predict that that would happen. So he didn't know when he might need to turn to this plan B, but when he did, like, thank God, he knew what to do instantly. In fact, his coach, it's been rumored, would like rip his goggles off of his head and smash them on the side of the pool, so that there's no way he could even practice with these goggles. I don't know whether that's true. That seems a bit overly dramatic, but maybe. But the point is that he did practice swimming without visual experience, without sight. And so he had that backup plan and could enact it right away.
Right. So you're saying it, as it pertains to the secret of things like that, just foreshadowing the path that you're on and being prepared and creating these contingencies isn't about chicken little thinking. It's more in preparation for the path that you're about to take.
Right. And the secret doesn't tell us simultaneously make a board of all the ways that this plan isn't going to work out, that it's going to fail, right?
Right.
Envision yourself crying, envision yourself without the time and the money. Like, no one makes a board like that.
Right.
I'm not saying necessarily you should, but it is worth the time to think through what happens if X. How could this plan go wrong? What are the ways that it might, and what would I do? What resources
Totally.
might I have? And you're not going to be able to flesh out that whole alternative line. But if you can give yourself a jump start, then you won't be starting already a quarter of a mile back if you should experience that kind of obstacle.
I'm curious, how long did it take you to write the book? And during that time, what is the most surprising thing that you discovered that wasn't even on your radar?
Well, yeah, we talked about time. Time is the biggest challenge, right? In time management. And I was a case study and just how poorly I managed the time and how much time is a problem, honestly. So as a professor, you have these moments in your career where you get to take a break from teaching to focus on your research career. And so I was in one of those moments of the sabbatical. And I had a baby also. Well, sorry, let me back up and say I had a sabbatical, and I thought, oh, for my sabbatical project to focus on research, I want to take all the research that we've done over 20 years and write a book that non-scientists would enjoy, and that takes the science and shows the importance for everyday people with the important goals that we're all trying to work towards. And a friend of mine had set me up with some connections to help ease that whole process of going from writing the ideas to writing the book to having it published. So I already felt like I've got a foot in the door here, working with an agent. And I just thought, like, I have 15 months. I can come up with a proposal. The agent can sell the book to a publisher. It'll get out there. I'll write it. It'll be done. It'll be wonderful. 15 months. I can totally do that. At the end of 15 months, I didn't even have a proposal that the agent said was worth trying to put out to the world. I had written 9 different proposals. Each of them was 100 pages, single spaced. And with each iteration, I scrapped 80% of the one that came before it.
Wow.
And I just couldn't figure out, like, what am I doing wrong here? Like, why aren't any of these ideas like sticking with him? It was learning a whole new language, honestly, to write for different audiences, and to write a proposal rather than a book also is another like layer of translation that I was still learning. But all of which is to say, like, I had given myself 15 months and like I had barely gotten out of the starting gates with this process. And I had a baby. So the baby was a month old. I was reading through my contract, trying to see like, how can I get out of this contract with this agent? This is just not working. How can I break this contract? It didn't work for me. Okay. And the agent called and said, I sold your book today. I sold the proposal today. What? I thought you didn't even like it. And he said, take this phone call. You have a couple hours to decide if you're gonna take the deal.
Hours.
Yeah, a couple hours. It's an exploding offer by the end of the day. It's take it or leave it. And this is the opportunity. And I was like, holding the baby. Okay, let me see. Trying to dial my husband, trying to dial a friend. Like, what do I do? And my friend had just said, like, whatever you do, if you take this deal, just make sure you don't have to write a book in the first 12 months of your baby's life. So the publishing house said, you have 12 months. You have the first 12 months of your baby's life to write this book. And I was like, oh, but this is the opportunity. So it was so poorly, like life was so poorly timed. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. And I love the book at the end of the day, but it was a slog. It was a hard slog with, unforeseen challenges. Like I didn't realize that I couldn't, that it would take so long with the agent and that the opportunity would come at what other people have said was the absolute worst chance in your change of life here to make this happen. But I did make it happen. Another funny thing is just like, there's a contract, you have to write 90,000 words. I wrote 60,000 words. And then I thought, oh, there's a whole back end stuff where you put where your sources are and all of that. And so that's like probably a 30,000 words. So, but I didn't feel like I could go to the publisher and be like, is that like 60,000 words with the reference section? That just felt like, it's like what some of my very young students do to me. Like, how many pages? Can it be like triple spaced? It's like, oh, now I get why the students say this to me. And you're like, just write the ideas. Come on, don't be so concerned, whatever.
Right.
And my friend who had gone through this before was like, no, you have to write 90,000 words of a story. Okay. Like, no, you don't get to count the index at the back. But that was so amazing because I had written the science and I still had a third of the book to go. And so that's when I just got to do what is the most fun part of it, which is just tell all the stories of the people, like the Michael Phelps story. And I don't even know, 50 more stories like that of these incredible people that I live in this amazing city of New York City, where people are just so different. There's so many different life experiences that are reflected here. And I got a chance to meet a lot of people who are doing incredible things, who all use some aspect of the strategies that the science says would be helpful. Some of them knew those strategies would be working. Oftentimes they didn't. And it was just one of their fortuitous, elements of success is that they happen to use something that science also shows is a useful tool for meeting goals. And so it's not, that's what made the book so fun, was just that it's, the science, and the science has utility for real people accomplishing really amazing things. Like, for example, I was speaking at an event where it was like a crazy cocktail party in a really beautiful loft in Soho, and like people were showing up who were magicians and who had business cards where if you held it in your hand long enough, it would sprout flowers. Like, it was like wild who was there. And they said, we're going to interrupt the cocktail party and have you talk about science. And I was like, oh, that sounds awful. No one's going to want to listen to me. I don't even want to have my cocktail party interrupted to listen to me. And then he said, and the person who comes before you, he just won an Oscar award for best animated short. And then we'll have somebody else speak after you. And he is a magician. He does card tricks, but he does them while he's jumping out of a plane and parachuting. And he does these card tricks at like 15,000 feet. And I was just like, oh God, no, really nobody's going to want to listen to me. But it ended up being great. It was fun. We got to wear, in my little session, we wore 3D glasses, got to show off visual illusions. And the two people on the other side of me were incredibly amazing. But I showed up early to this event. And somebody came up to talk to me, and I thought maybe it was the tech person helping to get things sorted out. It wasn't. It was just somebody else at this party who showed up early who came to chat with me. But he jumps out of airplanes and with a stunt team. He works for Red Bull doing these amazing stunts that you've seen all over social media. And he does things like, jump out at 25,000 feet without a parachute and land in a net and how is that even possible? Or, in sort of a deconstructed living room, he's sitting on a couch, he's playing Xbox from 20,000 feet in the air with this like structure around him. And how is he living through all of this?
What?
So those kinds of stories, those kinds of incredible, amazing people, how do they do what they do? How do they accomplish these cool things that they accomplish in their life? The answers to that resonate with the science that I'm sharing. So your question was what was amazing, or what were some new things?
Yeah, that was surprising through all
Yeah,
your
I mean,
research.
right, just how pervasive these tactics are and how much utility can be derived from them. I'm not talking about like, how do you become a mother and an academic at the same time? It's not that kind of a book.
Right.
The goal is to showcase the wide variety of human experiences and the relevance of these particular tools to so many different types of people and so many different kinds of goals that you might have.
Right. Yeah, it's particularly interesting that you had to write that during that first year of your child's life. I can imagine that was a bit frenetic.
Yeah.
And because for right now, and maybe this is before we dive into more content, because so right now I'm in the middle of writing a book. I'm about 55,000 words in, and I have the time aside from my regular job, but the last 3 months I've done F all, and I don't know why, and that's why in the first bit of our conversation, I really have the motivation, and the people I've been researching, I've been interviewing, and researchers I've spoken to, and all these things, like we're all really pumped about the book and about the topic, et cetera, et cetera. But I just can't get myself back in the chair enough, because I feel like every time I sit down, sometimes I'm jumping out of a plane at 25,000 feet without a parachute. And so I was wondering if there's any research that, I'm sure you thought about it during writing your book and having to get up and take care of a kid and write the book and and I was wondering if you had any prescription that you think I could deploy.
Yeah, two things. One is just write what you're excited about in that moment. As I was, a long time ago doing my dissertation for my PhD, and then having flashbacks as I was writing this book of like, you've got 90,000 words. You got a lot of space to fill and a lot of
Right.
opportunity to write. And you can feel so overwhelmed by this huge goal and the blank paper that you're staring at in front of you. Many things to say, actually. So the first is write what you want to write about. So I would go to these parties and be like, oh my God, I just met the craziest person. I just want to make sure I remember all the vivid details about that experience and the fun bits that I learned. And so like that night or the next morning, I would just write it. I don't know where it's going to fit in the book. I'm not really sure how it's going to relate yet to the themes that I want to share, but I just know like this story is interesting and people need to hear it. So I would just write it.
Okay.
And I would do that all the time. I have a little bit of science. Oh, I just learned this new thing about science and I really want to put that in the book. I would just write it. And so then it was like having, a folder of 50 puzzle pieces. These are all independent little thoughts. They're nice little puzzle pieces. They're like cool little bits, but they're not a book, right? They're not
Right.
even a point yet. But I had 50 of them. And then you can start to put together a jigsaw puzzle and figure out, well, how do these go together? Do these pieces fit together? And now you don't have 50, but now you have 20. Now you have 20 chunks. And then
Right.
you can start to piece it together. And then you've got 30 pages written. So that's what I would do, is just like capitalize on your interest. When something is interesting in your brain, then take that moment and just write it down, and don't worry about, well, where's it going to go? I'm writing my introduction right now. But this isn't intro material. Who cares? Like, as you
Right.
write it anyway, whatever was the conclusion is going to become the introduction. Somebody who reads it's going to totally reshape your book anyway. So like, don't you feel beholden to have to approach it linearly.
Okay.
The second thing is, where do you find motivation? Again, it's not that you aren't motivated, but sometimes it can feel overwhelming. The big
Yeah.
goal that you have, it can feel overwhelming. And so in those moments when you are just starting out, or in those times when you're just starting out and you might feel that sense of overwhelm, the looking forward to like, how much more do I have to do, is going to feel overwhelming. But take a different perspective. Look back. How much have you accomplished? How many chunks do you have written?
Yeah.
When you look back versus look forward on goal progress, especially when you're in those early stages, or in other cases when somebody is less committed or it's something they don't know that they have the expertise to do, looking back is more advantageous than looking forward because of that feeling of overwhelmingness that can come. So if you're starting to feel like, I don't think I can do this, that's when you should look back and prove to yourself you can, because you have. Look at what you have done right now. And that can
Yeah.
take you out of that sort of debilitating anxiety about and second guessing about whether you have what it takes to go that long distance. Um, there was a third thing that I was going to say. I don't know. Do you want to riff on any of that?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think because overwhelm, I think, is what I feel the most. Because
Mhm.
sometimes I'll sit down for a new chapter and a new part I really want to write. And it's not just writing it, it's that I realize I've got to take all the little bits of information that I found in this book and that article and that study and this story of someone really interesting, and to synthesize it. I feel like someone's doing, open skull surgery on me right now, and it's that difficult. And so, yeah, I think that's maybe it. That something I'm excited about, and then just write it. I think it's taking that regulator off of the
Mhm.
editor while I'm trying to be the creator.
Yeah, there's a phrase in writing called "killing your darlings,"
Right.
and this is similar to that space. So the idea of killing your darlings is you might have written something that's really amazing. You have this idea that's really amazing, but it just doesn't work in this moment or in this piece, and it can be really hard for people to let go of that. It might be pulling people too much on a tangent, or it's just not relevant, or it doesn't work, and people hold on. In psychology, we might call that the endowment effect. Anything that you've created or that is associated with you just has so much more value than it does for somebody else. And that can be really challenging. There's also the alternative, which is, well, there, so take that idea and then just think like you have some of those that you might want to be holding on to, but you don't know where it goes right now. Don't force it to go in somewhere right now. Just know you've got a backup reserve. You've
Hmm.
got, like a mise en place. You have a couple other cups
Right.
of spices and ingredients, and you're not going to use all of them in every single dish, but they're there. And as you taste it, as you read what you've written, your drafts, as you read through your whole manuscript, you might get inspired and realize, oh, this like other little bowl of spice that I have that I haven't used yet actually would fit in really well here.
Hmm.
So you don't have to force some idea in if it doesn't seem like it's coming naturally. You can hold on to it, and maybe later on, as you see the whole flow, as you see the whole entree come together, you might realize, oh, we could use another little splash here and fit in some of those darlings that you didn't force in the first place. I also just try to, like, two other things that I'll say, which is we need to set like realistic goals. If your goal is to write a book and that's the level at which you maintain your goal, write this book by June 13th, 2025, that is so hard. That is so hard to have that be the goal because there's so much that has to happen. You need to unpack that goal. You need to
Yeah.
say, like, what's my goal by June 31st, by July 31st? And then have an accountability system, like somebody that you report to that might have a similar goal as you, or who's just happy to like help keep you on track. And like an accountant would for your financial situation, sort of do that post-mortem on your goal progress and see like, okay, you set this goal, how much did you get done, where are you at, do we still seem like we're on track to meet the bigger goal?
Right.
And having somebody else just physically present in those conversations is going to do more for you. That even if you're totally self-disciplined, I feel like I'm highly self-disciplined. I love writing and I don't have the time, and that's the problem. So having somebody else help me with that, help me with those conversations, it's like I don't need someone to push on me, but I do need somebody to make sure that I do it, that I get the job done, and that I have to report to, and that's useful. And even if
Right.
you don't have that other person, something that I write about in the book is that one of the other issues was just that I had this chronic nagging sense of anxiety of like, I have a contract, baby, I have a job, I have 40 people that work in my research lab that I'm responsible for, that are reporting to me, that I train, and I got to write this book and I'm not doing anything. And also in the book, I apply all of those tactics that I talk about and suggest other people try. I apply them to myself to learn to become a drummer while I have a baby. I have an infant. We live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Manhattan.
Oh my
So
gosh.
a stupid goal, but I wanted that. I wanted something about me that wasn't just about changing dirty, gross diapers. When friends would come over, oh, what's new? How are you? How is it? How is everything? It's like, I have nothing interesting to say. I am no longer an interesting person. So I decided I needed to become a rock drummer when it was a dumb goal, but like it was important for me. It was,
Sure.
yeah. But I also had to become a drummer because I'm writing about that in the book. And I couldn't be like, oh, try these 12 tactics. They didn't work. I couldn't accomplish my goal. Like that couldn't be the end of this story, right? I had to
Right.
figure this out. Plus, I had booked a show for myself to hold myself accountable publicly. I had to play. I had to be able to play.
Yeah.
And I just felt like, I'm not writing this book. I'm not learning how to play drums. I'm going to throw up about all of this. This was awful. This confluence of events at this time in my life is just terrible. But what I did was a tactic that I learned from a collaboration that I came upon called the Dear Data Project. Asterisk, look that up. It's really cool. But when I talked to these two people who had this amazing collaboration, one of the things that they said that they used to sort of keep track of this data that was in their project was called the Reporter app. There's lots of apps like this out here, but it was an app I put on my phone that would randomly ping me, in my case, like 5 or 6 times, 5 times a day or something like that, and ask, did you write or did you practice drums? And if the answer was yes, it would ask me more questions. How did you feel? Because I told it to ask me this stuff, to just like check in, to be my accountability partner. Right. And I just felt like, God, this thing is so annoying. I mean, I told it to be annoying, but it's so annoying. I keep saying like, no, I didn't. Okay. No, I haven't. No, I haven't. I haven't practiced. I haven't written. Okay. And then, but occasionally I would have said, yes, I must have, because at the end of the month, I downloaded all the data from the app. I like data. I looked at it on my computer and I saw trajectories that I couldn't feel in the moment. So I actually had practiced. What was a reasonable amount? I practiced on some weekends, 5 days out of the week, the work week, I didn't practice at all. But like, okay, I practice once or twice each weekend. Like, well, that actually is reasonable. But for 5 of the 7 days, I just felt anxiety about it. And that's what dominated. And I felt like I'm not getting any better at the drums and I'm not getting any writing done. But when I looked at my own reactions in the moment, they were increasing. I had gone from like literally crying. I was crying. I wrote to myself, I was crying. This was awful. I'm terrible. To like, oh, actually somebody gave me a compliment. This isn't so bad. Within the span of a month. But our memories get in the way of us being accurate accountants of our own progress. Because what was leading for me was like 5 out of the 7 days that I wasn't doing anything. Or those moments when I was crying about the stupid goal that I decided to put on myself. Those are the things that stick in our memory, are the extremes. And so it can make it hard for us to assess like what our actual progress is when there are moments that get more weight than they should. And so things like that helped me get a better sense of how am I actually doing? What is my actual rate of progress? And then use that information, like your point earlier about like, let's get back to reality. It helped me realize the reality of my progress and then make better decisions about whether I was on track and what I needed to do to hit the actual goals. And I did hit the goals. And I did learn to play one song on the drums and I got the book done because you're here talking about it.
Amazing. What song did you learn to play?
Well, the one I was really trying to play was from this band from like the 80s. And the song, Your Love. It was like number 6 on the UK's top 100. It was like a cheesy 80s pop song. But it's one that I could do. My husband actually is a good rock drummer. It's not his career. He's in finance, but he's a really great rock drummer. And so he was going to give me the first lessons. And he was like, okay, first lesson, first week, choose a song you're going to play. Just listen to that song constantly through the day. Every moment of your day, just listen to the song. So I did that. I chose U2's Bloody Sunday and did that for a week. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready for my first lesson. I listened to my song for a week. He's like, great, what is it? I was like, Sunday, Bloody Sunday. And he was like, no, that's way too hard for you. You'll never learn that song. It's like bolero, right? It has like this like steady drum like beat in the back. And I thought like, oh, that's like a great out. I just have to learn how to do one thing and then do it for 4 minutes and I can play U2. Right. And he was like, yeah, true. But there's a reason why they're so incredible. So then he suggested this, The Outfield is the name of the band. The Outfield's Your Love. And he's like, try that one instead. And I was like, all right, cool. Is it a cool song? Because like this whole point is like to be cool again. And he's like, no, it's not cool. And he actually is cool. And he's like, but I think it's really fitting for you. Like, okay. So that's the song that I learned to play. And I played it for like a small show when I had set this goal, like when do I need to have this done by? And so I did that. And then the book came out and I was speaking about it to some major conferences of other people. And one of them was like, several thousand people had taken over this hotel in Arizona. And I did the keynote for this conference. And then the conference organizer comes up on the stage. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I read your book. And in the book, you said you know how to play this song. Well, we have a band for the party tonight. You're going to sit in with the band, right? And play this song. And it's like, you can't say no, right? Because
Yeah.
I just told all these people like these strategies work. And so then I did that. So I played this huge show for this conference, like end my keynote presentation about these topics.
That's
And then
pretty awesome. I
we
actually,
ended.
I think that's an amazing example to use on yourself because it's something that is like quote unquote frivolous. Like it's not something that you really have to have in your life.
Yeah,
You didn't have to learn how to drum song. You have a baby, you have a book. Like there's so many other things that are more crucial. So this is something that was way more of a want than a need, but
yeah,
you made yourself go and do
yeah,
it. So I think that
yeah,
example is excellent. So I guess from people that are listening to this that have that little thing in their life that they want to do, they want to start a yoga class or write poetry or learn to play an instrument or all these things. What are some of the main things from the book that you could share that would really help them and kind of get them on that path?
yeah. Well, especially when it comes to these kinds of goals, like you're saying, it wasn't a need. If I didn't learn to play drums, I'm not going to lose my job. I'm not going to lose
Right.
my apartment or my health insurance, right? But it was important to me. It was like a form of self actualization that like I needed. I needed it for myself. I wanted it for myself.
Hmm.
But the problem with those kinds of goals is not the problem. The problem with us with those kinds of goals is that we often like relegate them to a lower status. Like, I have to do this thing for my boss. I have to do this thing for my health. My doctor is saying I have to show up for that next like cardiology appointment. But those things that are just for us, in this case, like learning to play drums for me and just having more balance back in my life, it is just as important as seeing the cardiologist or hitting that meeting with your boss. So why don't we approach it the same with the same level of seriousness?
Right.
So why don't we schedule time into our calendar to practice drums or to spend an hour creating a website for the new yoga class that we want to put on, even if it's not the way that we get our bills paid, or it's not an obligation to somebody else but just ourselves. It should be treated with that level of seriousness. We
Hmm.
generally show up for those appointments that we put in our calendar. We generally don't bail on our boss when they call us in for a meeting. We generally don't no show for a cardiologist appointment when we know that there's something wrong with our heart. Put it in our calendar, carve out the time in your schedule. And then what happens, it's like it's not that like sophisticated or magical of a strategy. It's just that it has a big impact. It nudges us into arranging our life around this thing that's important for us.
Hmm.
Whereas the alternative is that we're just constantly trying to like, oh, I got to remember to do that. Well, if you ever have that experience, like, I got to remember to do that. You're always like having to remember because you never remember to do it, right? We
Right.
can't just leave ourselves like, I hope I remember or when I find time. No, time is the most precious resource that we have, our time and our health. And so no, we're not going to find the time. We make the time, you carve the time, you work the rest of your life around that, and you
Yeah.
increase the odds of making progress on this thing that matters.
Right. I really like that because it's this idea of being accountable to yourself, and
Mhm.
that's where I realized like I'm angry at myself. Like I was supposed to write at least 20,000 words from January, and I just haven't. I've been doing other things. I've been simply not doing the thing that I wanted to do, and I've still been researching experts on it and taking notes and compiling more information. It's kind of been an excavation of my own life as well. So there's been um, positivity that's come from it, utility from it, but it hasn't been that thing. And I can feel myself getting angry at myself for
Yeah.
not writing it. So I completely relate to all of that.
So Katie Milkman is an incredible behavioral scientist, and she writes about the idea of fresh starts. So I hear you, Michael, saying like, "Oh, by January I should have done 20,000 words." Okay, it's not January and you didn't do it.
Yeah.
And but like keeping that mantra in your mind, of course you're going to continue to feel disappointed in yourself and angry. But you know what? Tomorrow is Friday. Well, at least for me, I don't know, maybe it's Saturday for you, different time zones, right? But tomorrow is Friday. Tomorrow is the start of a weekend. And a weekend is an amazing time to start something new. Or it's your birthday. I don't know what your birthday is. Your birthday's in a week. Great. That's an incredible fresh start. Or it's the start of July, July 1st. Like you can come up with days that have psychological meaning, just like January
Oh,
1st, new year. This is, and like New Year's resolution.
I like
So
this.
many days you can imbue with psychological meaning and wipe the slate clean because you can't do anything about the fact that it's not January and you didn't write the 20,000 words,
Right.
except start over, right?
Yeah. That's great. That really is exceptional. And so from the people or the people you've interviewed and all the stories you've compiled, was there one commonality for well, like one thing people use the most? Because I know there's sure some levers everybody can pull depending on the life, and like some will the fresh start, some will be you have someone that can make keep you accountable. Like, was there one through line that you felt was more consistent than others?
No, there actually isn't a through line, which I think is really important. The sort of framing of the book and the way that I think about all of this is that we have a toolkit. You can't build a house with just a hammer. You need a lot of different kinds of tools. So there isn't one tactic that like everybody uses it and ensures success because we are different people. Our goals are different and the social context changes. Like what can we pursue now it can change, and just in the same way that like what you're trying to put together might not go together with a hammer, it might need a screwdriver. The same is true with the tactics or the tools that we have available to help us with our goals. We don't want just one tool, we want 12 tools, and we want to
Right.
know that like when this one stops working or this one just isn't right anymore, I've got something else that I can pivot to. And so that's really the structure of the book, is to say like, you know what, here are a bunch of different things you can try. Here's a situation when it probably would work better. Here's a kind of person where this tool might work better. Um, and I think that the danger of just relying on one or finding that one single through line is that like, well, what if it doesn't work for me?
Right.
Because there won't be one thing that works for literally everybody. You can be left internalizing like maybe it's something about me. If there's this one thing that everybody who's successful uses and I'm using it and it's not, I'm not successful, then the problem is me.
Then I'm
And that's
broken.
never the answer. The problem is not it's you.
Right.
It's just that we have to set ourselves up differently for success. So I think there's danger in trying to find that one thing or the perfect formula that works for people, for those for whom it doesn't work.
I love that. Yeah, because there are these simple pills and tricks, etc. You see online that says
Yeah.
you need to take this; it'll make your life better. Do this, but like everyone's life is different. It matters what culture you're in, what family you're in, what's pressing at that time, etc., etc. So I really appreciate that. I guess to go back to visual perspective for a moment, did you realize through all of these stories and the people that you spoke to that the way they saw the world was any differently from
Mhm.
other people? Because I know that like that's kind of like the byline of the book, and
Mhm.
I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah. So this is just, trying to suggest here are strategies that maybe you don't know about or that you don't use or that you aren't mindfully using. Maybe you do use them, but here is, I can teach you why what you're doing is actually
Hmm.
important and effective. And the idea does come down to sight. I think there's great power for those of us that have the sense of sight to be able to use it. More of our neurological real estate, more of our brain space is taken up by processing our visual experiences than anything else, more than taste or touch or
Wow.
smell or hearing. Our brains love to see. They dedicate a huge majority of resources to it. There's also phrases like seeing is believing. And we do have that sort of naive realism that what we see reflects reality the way that it is. But there's lots of examples of where that isn't the case. If you remember the dress that went viral on social media, is it blue and black or white and gold or whatever? There's visual
All
illusions
right.
that are out there that are prime examples of how like we don't all see the world the way that it is. And I don't like who's right in that case. Are you right and I'm wrong? Am I wrong and you're right? But those are so fun because they're so sort of rare that we have that insight. But if our brains really like to see and we really trust what we see, why don't we leverage that? Why don't we take advantage of that to try to help us with our goals? So, like I was saying, like put it in your calendar. When you see it in your calendar, you'll work the rest of your life around it rather than just trying to rely on memory. What
Hmm.
is going to help us more? Seeing it or remembering it? Seeing it is going to help us more. And there's lots of examples of that in the book. Just to land with one last concrete one, is like, how can we see the world differently? one of the first big explorations that we did was into exercise and looking to see how can we help people to get more steps in, increase the intensity of their physical activity. Are there strategies that we can use? I first started by interviewing some of the fastest male runners in the world, and asking them, like, what do you do? I thought they might have like superpowers of perception, that they could like see the goal, but also see where all the competition is. And that's how they could stay ahead of everybody. They're motivated by making sure that they stay ahead. And they said, no, that's not what they do at all. They choose a target, they stay narrowly focused on that target. And if they don't do that, then they know that they should, because they think it's more effective. And it's not just male sprinters that do that, but when I started looking into like, what is the first woman who ever won the marathon in the Olympics, like, what does she do? Same idea. Focus on something until you hit that target, then reset the next target and focus just on that. This sort of narrowed focus of attention was different than what I thought would be the case for how do like fast runners do their thing. But then I got it. What they were saying is like they just keep setting these small incremental goals. They hit it, they reset the next one. They hit it, they reset to the next one.
Right.
Well, I can teach people that. I can teach people about what it means to imagine that you have a spotlight shining just on a target up ahead. Imagine that you have blinders on the sides and you're not paying attention to what's on the left and the right. And do that until you hit the target and then set another one. Okay. You could imagine it just as I said it. Mm-hmm. And people can, and they do. And when they do that, what we find when they adopt that style of looking at the world around them, they move 23% faster, and they say it was 17% easier. When they use that strategy, and they can use that strategy well after we're standing there watching and observing what they're doing. And when they learn that strategy, they go out for walks more often. They take more steps in each of those walks. They're increasing the frequency and the intensity of their activity by simply shifting away from what was at least my default thinking on what makes people effective at exercising, what can increase the intensity of their exercise. It wasn't what I thought, but it's something that I can learn and that I can teach. And that when other people learn that, it also has similar improvements for how they go about their exercise goals. So that's one example about how just gaining some insight about how are we looking can change what we're doing and the progress that we're making towards, in this case, our health goals.
Right. I really like that. Even applying it to, I guess, an instrument or writing, you could be write a section of this chapter or write this chapter, because chapters can be done in a week or a month or a smaller amount of time, where a book might take a year or 2 years, etc., and need a lot more. So I like the idea of completely resetting. So even not thinking that this is one part of a whole, just thinking, no, this is the part. This is the thing. And then once that thing's done, then you can open the door to everything else. If it's a song or a part of a song or whatever. I like the bite-sized approach to achievement.
Yeah, thanks.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, so I want to say thank you very much for being here. I'm excited to dive more fully into the book myself and get my highlighter out. I think it's going to be super helpful. So I guess where can people find you? Where can they find the book? And let's send them there.
Sure. You can find the book on Amazon or wherever you buy your books, and you can find me on LinkedIn is a good place to find me, or just Google my name and see what's going on.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Emily. Take care.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
So thanks for listening to No More, No Less. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. So please subscribe and rate the show if you enjoyed it. It'll help me create more amazing content and get that next little bit of validation that I so deeply crave. If you did enjoy it, well, that sucks. But to make sure, I think you should listen to my next 10 episodes and then decide. I mean, come on. Rome was not built in a day. I'm just getting warmed up here, guys. So thanks again. See you next time.